So, welcome to our second installment of the Cybersecurity Awareness Training. In the previous one, we discussed why cybersecurity training is important to do. It's because staff members are typically an entry point for cybercriminals into a network. And then also in that first video, we talked about password security and password best practices to avoid you falling prey to cyber attacks. In this current one, we're actually going to talk about probably one of the most prevalent cybersecurity issues at the moment, and definitely during the pandemic, and that is phishing. We're here with Thomas, who's our cybersecurity expert at spriteCloud. So we're going to kind of take turns presenting here, and I'm going to take the first half, and he's going to take the most important second half, which is talking about how to recognize phishing scams and kind of how to what to do about them. So Chapter 3, Phishing. So what is phishing actually? So phishing involves trying to trick the recipient into believing that a message or some form of communication is from a legitimate source, and in doing so, make them perform an action that compromises their security. So, very complicated words. Someone tries to trick someone else into giving either their passwords up or sensitive information like financial information or social security numbers, or in the Netherlands, that'd be what's called a worker service number, so BSN. So, for example, you see two images there of Netflix. One of those is a phishing attempt. As you can tell, it obviously is a little bit more difficult. Cybercriminals are actually, putting quite a bit of effort into making an email look pretty legit. But actually, the one on the left is actually the phishing kind of attempt. And the one on the right, as you can see, has my name in it, so it's actually the proper one. But yeah, so phishing is something that we all encounter. Fortunately, a lot of email clients do a pretty good job at blocking a lot of them automatically, but there are still some that get through. And the point of this is also to kind of give you a best idea, not only about emails, but what other methods or types of phishing there is out there. So an important distinction we'll talk about is what the difference is between phishing and spoofing. So sometimes they're used interchangeably, but that's not actually the case. Spoofing is actually a technique that's employed in phishing attacks, and basically what spoofing is faking something. So spoofing helps fool the recipient into freely giving their information to a cybercriminal organization. So as I mentioned here, this could be an email, it could even be a phone call, or it could be a website that has been spoofed. So for example, there are two comparisons here. So if you look at a URL, and if you look at it pretty quickly, you may mistake the bottom one, which is Netflix, to look like Netflix. So they actually are pretty comparable. So a lot of times what people do is they'll just rearrange some letters so that they're not so noticeable so quickly. So now we're going to talk about the types of phishing. So the most common type of phishing is email phishing, and this is by far, I believe, about 80% of phishing attempts or actions come through email. And basically, a cybercriminal, for example, in this example here, is spoofing a PayPal email and using urgent language to try to get you to log into your PayPal account. But in actuality, you'll be logging into a fake website. You could go to that fake website by clicking that link there where it says log into PayPal. And by doing that, you would give them your login credentials. And then doing that, they would be able to steal your money. So in this case, a fake website or some sort of link manipulation would be used to take the user to that fake website, that spoofed website. And other ways that cybercriminals can actually gain information in phishing emails is by having an attacker download some sort of attachment that has malware in it. So, for example, it could be. We'll talk about this more later because that's more, technical and something that Thomas has much more knowledge in. But basically, you can download malicious macros or .html attachments that could seem normal, but actually do something quite damaging. And also another thing to look out for is PDFs and Microsoft Office file formats are also typically the most used form of attachments in this case. Spearfishing is a more targeted approach versus the normal phishing emails. So I like to think of it as a kind of a sniper shot versus a shotgun blast or a machine gun blast, because it is very much targeted to a particular person exploiting a particular relationship. So in this example of spearfishing, the attackers probably used LinkedIn to learn a bit about the company structure and determine kind of who to contact. So they could have also have compromised the email of the CEO, or at least had some way of spoofing that email address. And basically, they could have also said that they're emailing from their private address. So for small organizations, it is a good practice to maybe require a verbal confirmation of payments or payment processing for a payment of a certain amount. So if you say within the organization, maybe accounts payable, if you receive an urgent payment request from anybody, you need to also get a verbal confirmation if it's above a certain amount, say maybe $1,000 or euros or whatever. So in this example, you see someone who's trying to impersonate the CEO and ask for a urgent payment, and making some good excuses that if you're not trained for it or you're not aware of it, would probably actually work. Now, so obviously we are familiar with email phishing, but also phishing is just the term that kind of goes along with trying to fake legitimate emails to get something done. And social media phishing is also something that happens as well. So typically the tactics include impersonating somebody, impersonating customer support, or sending links that may download a malicious malware, or perhaps take you to a website that has been spoofed to look convincing, but actually would, for instance, in this case, maybe it'd be spoofing LinkedIn to say, hey, you need to click on this, or so you need to log into this website. So phishing on social media also goes by the name of angular phishing, and it's popular because nearly everyone is on social media, and unlike email, social media is a very rich medium. So there are many, there's images, there's links, and there's a lot of things that you can share on social media that could be used to add legitimacy to your claim and help you actually then fool your victim. So actually, services like our own cyber threat intelligence assessments are used to assess kind of what publicly available information is out there that criminals could use to mimic somebody in an organization. Now, code injection is more of an advanced cybercriminal process, hacking process, you could call, I guess. And basically, what it does is, for instance, code injection or content injection. Basically, what you do is you would use something like cross-site scripting, or maybe if you're able to gain access to a less secure website, you could put some sort of, I don't know the technical term, but a smaller window within that, and use that to collect information. So for instance, in this example, an Italian bank website was hacked to some extent, or it was either cross-site scripted. And doing that, they were able to create a form that was injected by these fraudsters. And using that, they're able to collect login information to this bank. So in this case, a lot of Italian bank owners would have been basically had their money stolen. So that's something to be aware of, but as it's not as prominent as I would say just email phishing is, but it's still something that can happen. And as you see in the HTML there, the URL there, it's important to kind of just keep an eye out in case anything suspicious is happening. Okay, and perhaps this one's probably the most important for anyone who travels a lot for business or who finds themselves working remotely, like we're all doing right now, but also mainly working remotely from a public kind of environment. So evil twin Wi-Fi can also be considered a man-in-the-middle kind of situation. But basically what happens is that a cybercriminal will fake spoof an open Wi-Fi hotspot name. So in the case here in the image you see, they just call it free Wi-Fi, and they basically make a duplicate of it. And if you have 50-50 choice of choosing between two Wi-Fi hotspots, you will invariably end up choosing the fake one. And basically what happens in that case is that your information will be either monitored or intercepted, basically as it goes through this Wi-Fi hotspot, and then be actually then connected to the internet. So it goes through a man in the middle to find out particular information. Using websites that are secured with an SSL certificate, so HTTPS instead of HTTP, will help a lot of situations in keeping you secure, because it is encrypted traffic, and it's encrypted connection, so that will help you kind of secure yourself a bit. But there are still more advanced ways in which cyber criminals can subvert that and steal information from you. So it's not always going to be completely secure. A VPN will not protect you from these things, because VPNs only do as much as an HTTPS connection will. When you see that on a VPN website, they say that it'll protect you from these things. It's not necessarily true. I mean, there's a bit a deeper issue there. But anyways, regardless of that, if you have something sensitive, like you are logging on to a customer database for your work, or maybe a personal life, you're logging into a bank account, try to save that until you get to a secure network at home, perhaps. And Thomas, maybe you have some further information or maybe some clarification that could help here.
Yeah. Thanks for asking me. Actually, VPN does help in this scenario, because you're creating a virtual tunnel, an encrypted tunnel over the internet. Basically, nobody can man in the middle you unless they're very, very technically sophisticated. But most people won't be able to do this. So you're safe if you go to McDonald's and use a VPN. You're okay. So that's just my addition that one.
Yes, well, that's the great thing while we have you here, because you can
thank you.
correct what I'm saying. So thank you. Now we talked more about man in the middle. So obviously, man in the middle is an instance there where it's an overarching term where someone is intercepting communications and passing along and helping you and pretending like that middle situation is not there. So as I mentioned, it's an advanced method, but in this case, we're talking about phishing, man in the middle when it comes to emails. So actually what some people will do is they will have some sort of method of intercepting an email and then changing the kind of the domain or whatnot to kind of spoof the email address. So you can imagine here, Alice sends an email to Bob saying, hey, can you pay this invoice? Here's my bank account number. But it's actually intercepted by Mallory, and Mallory changes the bank account's number to something that's her bank account, perhaps, and then passes that along to Bob. So this does happen, and as I mentioned, it is very advanced, and it's probably a lot more advanced than the evil twin hijacking, Wi-Fi hijacking. But it is something that does happen, and something to be aware of. But obviously, as we go further down these types of phishing examples, they become less common. Mobile phishing or smishing is not something I feel like happens very often here, but in the United States it is a pretty big problem, and that's basically sending fraudulent text or social media messages or even voicemails. And for example, this one is a FedEx package. Sometimes you get a notification that your package has arrived or whatnot, but cybercriminals here in this case have used that usability feature that FedEx has to help clients, and as a way to then get people to click a link, log into their FedEx account so that they can maybe change some delivery preferences. So this is a weird example because you wouldn't expect FedEx to have too much information on you that could be used like a bank account. But another one could be a fake fraud alert from your bank that you get that requires you to log into your bank to check what the issue was. And in doing so, the cybercriminals could then get your login credentials. So I think one important thing to see here is that a lot of cybercriminals are pretty crafty, and they're coming up with a lot of ways to fool us into giving them information. So there's another option as well. It's called Vishing, but I didn't include it because it's quite similar. But that's actually getting calls. So in America, actual calls from banks and stuff are a bit more common than they are in Europe. But it does happen, and some people do give away PIN codes or credit card numbers because they think that they're speaking to a legitimate representative of a bank. So as a matter of kind of best practice, you should never, through email or through phone call, give away that sensitive information. And most legitimate companies would never ask that of you. So this is where I'm going to hand it off to Thomas, because he's going to talk a bit more about how to recognize phishing and how to deal with it. I will give it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to have a small addition on slide 11 about the man in the middle. This will basically, since we're using Gmail at spriteCloud, this will virtually never happen because it's a trusted platform that cannot be intercepted. So really your email to the Gmail server is pretty secure. And so this will only happen if you have unencrypted emails going out. And so you won't have to really worry about this that much, but it does exist. So just that's what I wanted to say about the sheet. So thanks, Travis.
Okay.
So yeah, we can go to recognizing phishing. So basically in this section, we'll mainly focus on how to spot phishing emails. So you will know how to differentiate between good and bad emails. And let me explain some principles that will help you think critically about suspicious communications. So you will not open these. So basically, checking the domain is the first thing you do when you get an email. Let's say Andrew sends me an email. Is it Andrew at evilwebsite.com or is it Andrew at spriteCloud.com? That's an important thing to check. And you can do this by in your smartphone. You can actually click on the service.paypal and you would see whether it's actually sent from paypal.com or some weird email address. And in the image on the right, you can see that it's sent from service@paypal.com, but actually it's a very weird .world email address. So this doesn't seem very legit. On top of that, it says your PayPal account will temporarily be restricted. So what that does to a person is it will instill fear and anxiety into them, which will commit them to act. So that's what they try and do. Okay, so off to the next slide.
If I may just say something, I've done a lot of reading on obviously the topic recently, and basically these phishing scams work a lot better for the cyber criminals on mobile devices because on a desktop browser, for instance, you're able to typically see that the email domain that you see there a bit easier than on a mobile phone like this. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the more technical part. What you can actually do, especially on your desktop, is you can check the email headers, which is basically a lot of technical background information about the email itself. And you can copy those headers. I'll show you a couple of headers later on. You can copy those headers into Google Toolbox, which has actually got a tool to check message headers. So you can see in this small picture, Google Admin Toolbox message header. So you can copy them there, and it will analyze it for you, and it will tell you exactly what the path has been from the email from the person who sent it to you, and it will give you a whole timeline of the servers that have, where the email passed, so trajectory. how to get these email headers. Basically, on the right side of the slide, you see the three dots, when you go to your Gmail message, and you just press show original, and it'll give you all the headers, which on the next page, you can see, this is an example of the email header that you could provide into the Google Toolbox. You could just paste and copy and paste, and it will tell you everything. And this will also show whether the email is actually sent from paypal.com or some weird Gmail address that was registered yesterday or something. So that's very helpful to remember this. Yeah. All right. Next slide, Travis. All right, thanks. Check the legitimacy of the link URL. So most of the emails that you will get, they will try and trick you into clicking a link. So basically, it will say verify your account right now, otherwise you will lose your deposit, or you will be locked out of your account permanently. So what you do is you don't click the link, but you just hover over it. So you put your mouse over the link, and you can see where it goes. Does it actually go to PayPal, or does it go to evilbank.com or something? So check if it matches the content of the email. And also if the link is secure, if it actually starts with HTTPS. Because if it doesn't, it's basically an unencrypted communication line. So that's something to look for. Any additions from your side, Travis?
I think obviously on mobile devices, it's a little bit more difficult to inspect a link without clicking it. So one way to do it is to do a long tap, so just tap and hold, at least on Android devices anyways. Then you'll see this pop up here, which lets you see the full URL instead of just the anchor text. So I would definitely recommend doing that. But in any cases, if you do suspect it being if you have a good feeling that it is a phishing email, just delete it. And if it's really urgent, they'll probably contact you again.
So another thing, spelling mistakes. A lot of these emails, they come from people who do not know how to write proper English, or they say, have a lot of grammar mistakes. That's my experience. That's pretty much it. Just be mindful of those. Yes. They will also have weird greetings in them. Go to the next slide. So a lot of these emails are said like "Dear customer, dear value member," but since they don't know your name, because they only have your email address, they cannot really guess. Well, they can guess your name from the email, but typically they won't have it. So they choose kind of a generic greeting. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, I mean, as a marketer, I can kind of get some experience, my experience in that. I mean, if you are a legitimate customer of a brand, they will have you in a database where they'll have, a list of your name, even your birthday, and a lot of other things. So they can personalize an email message using that data that they have. But typically, someone who's doing a phishing scam like this would likely only have a list of email addresses. So for them, being generic like this helps them still seem personalized, but they might be able to know your name, obviously.
All right. Okay, so most companies don't actually send attachments in their emails, especially not like banks or service providers such as PayPal will never really send attachments unless you really ask for them. So be mindful that when you're opening attachment, especially executables or Word documents, that these can have sort of privilege on your computer and run as a program. Especially macros in documents such as Microsoft Office documents should never be executed. Basically, you get a pop-up, and a macro is basically a kind of extra addition that allows you to execute like frequently used tasks for those who've never worked with macros. So don't ever either open the documents and do not execute the macros. Even PDF files can put you at risk. About 8 years ago, I did a presentation for the company I was working for about opening PDF files, and basically we had a malicious PDF file which opened a link, PNC link to another computer, and we would be able to take over that computer just through opening a PDF file. So,
but hang on, I have a question. Yeah. Doesn't a good antivirus software prevent most malicious events on a computer from opening up a file like that? Because that's why we insist on Kaspersky, right? That's one of the reasons. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, it does help, but there's two things. If it's a zero-day exploit, which is not in Kaspersky, then it's not going to detect it really. Not in all occasions. And the other thing is, sometimes Kaspersky will only see it, or a virus scanner will only see it after it's been executed. So you've already opened it, and then it will say, oh, you have opened the virus. It will not tell you before you open it, because otherwise it hasn't scanned it yet, or it's too slow to, so there's a couple of sidetracks there. So best not to open anything. Just don't open anything. That's what I do,
I've noticed. So what I'd like to add there is obviously, the most important thing is if it looks like an email address that's unsolicited, that's from somebody you know or who is working with you, and they're sending an attachment, it's usually best to be cautious about that. Obviously, your colleague's email could be spoofed, or they could be compromised by someone getting their login details and doing an attack like this, but the chances of that are smaller. But just basically use your common sense. If something seems out of the ordinary because someone you don't know is suddenly sending you emails with attachments in them, then it's usually best not to to open that. And that's actually what we'll talk about a little bit later in the next slide, or not the next slide.
Yeah, sorry. So sensitive information is usually never requested. Which is true, because the companies that already know you should already have your information. So why would they ask for your password or credit card information? And if they would, it will be done in a secure environment. So it would either be through a encrypted, communicated website, secure application on your mobile phone, but not through email. Definitely not through email. Another thing to be mindful of is that a lot of people try and befriend you. Well, not a lot, but it happens. So on social media. So people actually, I used to be a security officer for the company I worked for before I joined spriteCloud. And we actually had high managers, high-end C-level people, having a lot of people message them on Facebook or LinkedIn, like, hey, how are you? Pretending to be a customer, but actually just trying to get more information. So be careful of that. Any additions from your side, Travis?
I'll take an example here from Reddit, and this is not the ideal one, but typically Reddit always says if you share personal information, your own or someone else's, they will ban you, because they do take their security pretty seriously. So, and they're social network of a sort, form technically, but that's just good practice. So don't share information of others or yourself, and practice safe social media.
So phishing messages often use like strong emotional language. It's not like they're cursing or anything, but they're trying to make you act. So how do you make a person act? Well, you can use fear, make them anxious. As I said before, threats restricting your account will, make you go into action a bit faster. So treat these with caution. As it says here, your PayPal account has been temporarily restricted. Well, if I had like 10,000 euros on my PayPal account, I'd be pretty hyped up about that. So see, that's how they work. On to the next sheet. This is just kind of an example of all the phishing things that we just talked about, such as, first of all, you can see in this example that they're saying dear user. So because they don't know my name, they're just addressing it to anyone. Of course, it's always about they're carrying out maintenance. So they're trying to make up an excuse for messaging you. And of course, it also contains kind of a threat. So failure to validate your account will make your account inactive or something. Then we have an attempt to redirect you to a link, which is review user interface. Yeah, as you can see, it's not even encrypted, it's HTTP. So any respectable company would have an encrypted website for sure, especially if you have to verify yourself. So those are just a couple of things to be mindful about. How to handle phishing? Yeah, very important to actually report it to, people in your company, like the system administrator or security officer. Now, I don't think we have any of those at SpriteCloud. We only have our teams. I'm not a security officer, cybersecurity specialist. But you can also report it to your email service provider. In Gmail, you can report spam and phishing, which will also help you to stop receiving such emails in the future. And of course, you can delete them, which is the thing I always do, is I just remove them so I will not accidentally open, click, or download.
Can I just jump in there?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sorry. If SpriteCloud staff get the type of email just mentioned there, it should be called out. I would suggest Slack, and I would almost, I can't guarantee it, but I'm very certain either Andy or me or Mark will get back to you if it's nasty. But you should call it out because our gateway is expected to cut down on this sort of thing, and we need to know when it doesn't. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Martin.
Thanks.
So the next slide would be use other methods to confirm claims. So if you suspect a phishing email, then you definitely don't want to click on the links to check. But there are several methods that can help you confirm if the email is actually legitimate or in fact part of a scam. So as we said, examine the email header, contact the sender using another channel. If the person is known, yeah, but if the person is unknown, then of course just leave it. If you suspect the person is a client, then of course try to find out about it, contact your colleagues, because we don't want to miss out on any client messages. And try and visit the website or the, I wouldn't click on any of the links, but you can definitely Google and find out if this is actually a legitimate company or if it's a phishing scam.
Yes, so if I can add something to that. So that last one that says visit known website independently of any links in the communication. So if you receive a phishing email from, say, PayPal, which is one of the most phished emails, brands, and you are kind of worried that your account is going to be restricted, what you could do is definitely don't click on any of the links there, but I would suggest maybe using a different device and logging on to your PayPal account using the normal website that you'd go to. So don't use any of the links that are given in the communications, but independently go on to PayPal. And if it is truly a proper claim that your account is going to be restricted in the app itself or in the secure environment of the web app, web browser, it should then also have that notification there. And that's one way to confirm whether that claim is actually true. And it's a way that you can then also say, oh, that's not true, and you can flag that phishing email and hopefully never see it again.